Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you're watching this video lecture. After the discussion of the theories of demand for money and supply of money into the market, let us move on to the third unit in chapter 3, that is related to monetary policy. Obviously, monetary policy is something that will be decided by Reserve Bank of India in India, and any central bank of any other country will be looking at monetary policy. But mostly, as far as this unit is concerned, we will focus and basically look at Indian context only. So this monetary policy unit consists of broadly two categories. One is the monetary policy framework itself and the organizational structure of the monetary policy decisions in the form of a monetary policy committee. So that is the implementation aspect. But what is this monetary policy framework in Indian context is majorly what we are going to discuss in this unit 3 of chapter 3. First of all, let us understand what is monetary policy. It is a program of action undertaken by the monetary authorities, normally the central bank, basically to control and regulate what both demand for and supply of money within the public. How also it will control the flow of credit naturally through the banking system. And what is the objective of this? With a view to achieving the predetermined macroeconomic goals, like what? So many of them: economic growth, price stability, which is again nothing but under control inflation, optimal levels of output and employment, balance of payments equilibrium, stable currency. These are all the various goals which are macroeconomic goals which are aimed to be achieved through monetary policy by the central bank of any country. Naturally in India it is Reserve Bank of India. That is the program of action undertaken by RBI, which controls and regulates the demand and supply of money and the flow of credit also. So the three things are there here. One is through monetary policy, the demand for money, supply for money and credit flow, let us say, is also controlled and regulated by RBI. That's what is called monetary policy. And this encompasses all the actions of the central bank which are aimed at directly controlling the money supply, of course, because money supply is within the purview of RBI, and indirectly regulating the demand for money. So in this demand for money point of view, Reserve Bank of India cannot directly do anything. That is why it will do indirectly some regulation of demand for money. But whereas the supply of money is there, definitely that is a direct control of RBI. So when it comes to money supply, there is a direct control. When it comes to money demand, there is an indirect regulation, we can say. That is where we talk about both control and regulation. Both of them are happening at the same time through the monetary policy taken by Reserve Bank of India. Now coming to what is this monetary policy framework. Of course, each of them can be a question. I don't have to tell that every time. So any of these things can be asked as individual small questions. So what is this monetary policy framework in India? So the monetary policy framework will be naturally decided by the central bank, and while executing the monetary policy, the central bank functions within some monetary policy framework, and that has three basic components. What are those things? First thing first, what are the objectives of the monetary policy? Second, the analytics of the monetary policy, particularly focusing on the transmission mechanisms. Of course, all of them we have to look at. What are the objectives? What are the analytics? And what are the operating procedures, which focus on the operating targets and instruments. So what will be the objectives of a monetary policy, and what are the instruments through which the monetary policy objectives are going to be achieved by the central bank. All this put together is called as monetary policy framework. Objectives of monetary policy, analytics of monetary policy focusing on the transmission mechanisms, and the operating procedures focusing on the targets as well as instruments. That is monetary policy framework. in a nutshell, which has three components. Then, coming to the first of them, what are the objectives of monetary policy? What could be them? There could be many objectives, but in general, just like that, on a broader level, if we see, the objectives of monetary policy could be maintenance of the economic growth, maintenance of the price stability, in other words, keeping the inflation under control, maintenance of exchange rate stability, also, that is another objective, could be, and ensuring an adequate flow of credit, very much important in any economy, because credit flow to the productive sectors is a crucial factor for the smooth functioning of economy, and that can be ensured through a monetary policy also. And sustaining a moderate structure of interest rates to encourage investments. Moderate interest rates. Why is that? As we already discussed earlier, higher interest rates will discourage investments. Lower or moderate interest rates will encourage investments, because that will reduce the cost of capital, and effectively the returns that can be expected over and above the cost of capital will become better when the interest rate and the associated finance cost is lesser. That does not mean interest rate will be so low compared to developed countries. There it is okay, but we have in India other aspects also to be kept in control, which is majorly inflation. That is why a moderate structure of interest rates, a balanced approach on selecting the interest rates has to be taken by RBI. And not only this, through this monetary policy, there will be a creation of efficient market for government securities, what we popularly can call them as GSEC, government securities, or T-bills, treasury bills. These are all government securities, and there is an active market for them, and Reserve Bank of India actively participates in buying and selling of these things, and that is also part of its execution of monetary policy. So these are the broad objectives of monetary policy, and such question can be asked for 2 to 3 marks. You have to write these points. What are the objectives? Maintaining economic growth, maintaining price stability, maintaining exchange rate stability, ensuring adequate credit flow into the productive sectors of the economy, and sustaining a moderate structure of interest rates so that investments are encouraged, and creation of an efficient good market for government securities. These are the broad objectives of monetary policy of any country. Particularly, again, we are focusing on Indian context. Then moving to the next level, when we looked at the framework, we had three things always we have to remember. What is the monetary policy framework we were looking at? First one is objectives, that's what we just now understood. Second one is the analytics, which focus on the transmission mechanism, so that is what we have to also look at. And after that, we'll have to even move on to what instruments are actually undertaken by the RBI to ensure its monetary policy is really implemented at operational level. So that comes later. But prior to that, what is this monetary transmission mechanism? Another question. What is this? The process or the channels through which the change of money aggregates or monetary aggregates affects the level of output and prices. Definitely yes, and that is called as monetary transmission mechanism. So whenever there is a change in the monetary aggregates, definitely that will have an impact on the level of output and prices. Level of output in general is indicated by the growth rates like GDP growth rate, etc., and prices is indicated generally by the inflation. Both of them are going to be influenced by the monetary aggregates. How they are going to be influenced is called as monetary transmission mechanism. And this monetary transmission mechanism describes how the policy induced changes in the nominal money stock, which is there available in the country, or in the short term nominal interest rates. So two things can be changed by central bank naturally. The nominal money stock, at the same time also interest rates. Both of them, will they have impact on the real variables? Yes, they do have. Like once again, aggregate output, employment, price levels, all these things are impacted by the policy induced changes through this monetary transmission mechanism. Of course, the point or the limitation that we have to also keep in mind is, though we know that the monetary policy has a definite influence on the output and inflation, but we cannot 100% be always certain how exactly it does, because the effects of such policy are visible often after a time lag. That is the other side of the coin, and that effect is also sometimes not completely predictable. But intention is what we are looking at. Actual result may or may not happen in the same way it is intended to be. That is the other side. But definitely, through the monetary transmission mechanism, change in the monetary aggregates will impact various things like level of output, prices, and employment. That process or channels through which this change happens is called as monetary transmission mechanism. And what are the broad monetary transmission mechanisms? There are 4 monetary transmission mechanisms broadly, where the monetary policy influences the price levels and national income. That's what we have been focusing majorly on. Of course, that will also have a direct impact on the employment also. So price levels once again is inflation, national income is like generally popularly GDP. So how this monetary policy is going to influence these major economic aggregates? It is going to happen through 4 types of mechanisms broadly. What are those called? One is called interest rate channel, second one is called exchange rate channel, the third one is called quantum channel, or basically related to the money supply and credit. We can call it as credit channel also. That is also called quantum channel. And the fourth one is called the asset price channel. Asset price channel generally happens through equity and other prices like real estate prices. So these are the 4 monetary transmission mechanisms that work, through which the monetary policy will have an impact on macroeconomic aggregates like price levels and national income. And what are the channels? We have to look at each of them one by one. First one is interest rate channel, then exchange rate channel, then credit channel or quantum channel, then asset price channel. Let us look at each of them one by one. First thing first, interest rate channel. How interest rate channel will work? We have to understand it conceptually. Then impact of that, whatever the monetary policy changes on the economic aggregates will be understood very easily. So when a monetary policy induced change in the interest rates generates corresponding changes in the cost of capital, yes or no? When the interest rates increase, naturally the cost of capital also increases and vice versa. So what happens? The real cost of borrowing for the firms and households also will change accordingly. We will take only one direction so that we can understand. Opposite also will be automatically holding good. Let us say interest rate has increased. RBI has decided to increase the interest rate. Imagine in one of its monetary policies, interest rate has been changed. If that change is increase, what happened? Automatically along with the interest rate increase, the real cost of borrowing has increased for households, for home loans, vehicle loans, all types of personal loans that people take. Their cost of borrowing has increased. Whereas for the firms, the cost of capital has increased because they also take loans from the market. So naturally, the interest rate represents one of the major portions of the cost of capital. So automatically both the things have also increased simultaneously, the cost of capital or the cost of borrowing, as the case may be, for firms and households respectively. And how do they respond? Okay, interest rate increased, cost of capital increased, cost of borrowing increased, but how do they respond? They will respond by changing their investment and purchase expenditures respectively, affecting the aggregate demand and employment. So if you take one side, let us say if the interest rate increased, cost of capital increased, that automatically increases the discount rate at which the investment proposals are going to be decided, that we see in the financial management, particularly investment decisions. When the cost of capital is more, naturally the discount rate also will be more. When discount rate is more, many investment propositions become less feasible, which means the investment expenditure itself will be less from the business point of view. From consumers' point of view or normal households' point of view, they will also reduce their expenditure. They will not purchase cars more because vehicle loans are expensive now, interest rate is high, or they will not purchase or construct houses because housing loans have become expensive because of higher interest rate. So like that, they will have their response in the changes of their investment and purchase expenditures, because of which naturally the aggregate demand and employment also will affect. In this case, that aggregate demand and employment will be affected negatively. When the new investment is less in the economy, employment generation will not be much. Same way, when the demand is less because of the higher interest rates from the households, the overall economic activity in the country will become slower. So when should a Reserve Bank of India increase the interest rates? Only when it wants to reduce the aggregate demand. And when will such situation occur? When the inflation is on the rampant phase. When inflation is very high, to reduce that a little bit, because inflation happens when the aggregate demand is too much than the supply or than the possible capacity of the market. Then only under that circumstances, Reserve Bank of India keeps on increasing the interest rates. This happened broadly when the inflation rates were very high during 2009, 10 and later on. Reserve Bank of India has increased the interest rates. But later on, since inflation is under control, Reserve Bank is not increasing interest rates much. Now, actually speaking, we are on the other side. Now the growth rates are low, and in order to push the growth, what is the response of Reserve Bank of India should be? It should reduce the interest rates. That's what it has been doing since almost 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes it will not change much to keep the things in balance. So Reserve Bank of India can change the interest rates by increasing them or decreasing them or keeping them as they are. But that will have a definite response from the households as well as firms. So when what can be called as a contractionary monetary policy? Contractionary monetary policy is this, where interest rates are increased. That is a contractionary monetary policy, where we want to increase the cost of capital and the real cost of borrowing for the firms and households respectively, and hence the firms and households cut back their investments and purchase expenditure respectively. Due to the decline in the investments and aggregate demand, a fall in the aggregate output and employment occurs. That is why this is called as a contractionary monetary policy. Simply increasing interest rates is a contractionary monetary policy, and you should understand the next effects of that. Increase interest rate, automatically cost of capital, cost of borrowing increases, automatically the investments and purchase expenditures decrease. That will also decrease the aggregate demand and fall in aggregate output as well as employment. Of course, that reduces the inflation also. So with the target of reducing inflation, sometimes the Reserve Bank of India can go for contractionary monetary policy. But if it is an expansionary monetary policy, the reverse should happen. The opposite effect will happen. What is the opposite effect? When interest rates reduce, cost of capital, cost of borrowing reduced, which means people will buy more by taking loans. If the credit is available very freely or interest rates are cheaper, then people go for more expenditure, and also the investments by the firms will be increased. So when growth is slow, when economy is in a little bit of deflationary conditions, then reduction in interest rates is good. That is called expansionary monetary policy. So that is in the nutshell interest rate channel through which the Reserve Bank of India will have an impact on the major economic aggregates like the aggregate demand and aggregate output and employment, inflation, etc. All of them are influenced by interest rate changes done by RBI. This channel is called interest rate channel. Now what is exchange rate channel? See, more of that actually we will discuss in the fourth chapter related to foreign exchange and all, but because it is there here also, we need to just be able to write a short note about what is this channel that is adopted. So typically this exchange rate channel works through expenditure switching between domestic and foreign goods. In other words, imports and exports. If we have more expenditure in the domestic market than importing the foreign goods, that is going to have impact on the strength of the currency. And if the domestic currency is appreciated, then automatically what happens is slowly domestically produced goods become more expensive compared to foreign produced goods. So these are little what you can call contradictory and paradoxical in nature. Which is good, which is bad, we cannot judge. Let us say your rupee has strengthened. Most of the times people will be saying very happy, oh see, we are very good and we are doing great, rupee strengthened. But is it really good? Probably no. Why? Because when rupee got strengthened, that makes our exports less attractive. And when the rupee is weak, our exports will be more attractive. So, when an appreciation in the domestic currency happens, which means the rupee got strengthened, that makes domestically produced goods more expensive. So, naturally, people will be shifting to foreign produced goods. So, the imports will become more and more than the local production. So, this switching the expenditure between domestic and foreign goods is called as exchange rate channel. How that currency fluctuations actually work, that we will see in chapter 4. But at this level, let us just understand only to the extent that switching of expenditure between domestic and foreign goods is called exchange rate channel. And what is the impact that happens when the domestic currency rates appreciate? Domestically produced goods become more expensive compared with foreign produced goods, which means slowly the demand for imports will become more than exports. So imports become cheaper with the appreciation in the domestic currency. With the depreciation in the domestic currency, imports become costlier. Because of they becoming cheaper or costlier, there will be an expenditure switching, and it is mutual. So because of exchange rates also expenditure switching will happen. Because of exchange rate expenditure switching also exchange rates will be impacted. Both are mutually connected with each other. How this is connected, that we will see in the 4th chapter later. But ultimately what happens because of this, that causes the net exports to fall when the appreciation of the domestic currency happened. So correspondingly, domestic output and employment also falls. So now, with this just general understanding, appreciation of domestic currency is not some good news. If rupee is strengthening we don't have to be happy. That is going to have a negative impact on the economy in general, at least theoretically. Really, will it happen or not is a different story. Theoretically, when the appreciation of domestic currency happened, that makes the domestically produced goods more costly and foreign produced goods will be cheaper. That causes net exports to fall because our exports will reduce and imports will increase, and correspondingly our domestic output and employment levels also fall because of this. And of course, every time opposite happens if the opposite cause has created some kind of impact. So if appreciation of domestic currency means all these things are happening. Depreciation of domestic currency means that is going to make imports expensive, which means the domestically produced goods become cheaper relatively. That means demand for domestic goods will become more and imports will become less. And our domestic goods, because they become cheaper, they get better exported. So our net exports will increase, and because of that, employment and domestic output also increases. That is the opposite effect that happens. This is exchange rate channel through expenditure switching between domestic and foreign goods. That is another monetary transmission mechanism. There are 4 monetary transmission mechanisms. We looked at interest rate channel. Second one is exchange rate channel. Now, after these two, let us move on to another channel that is called credit channel. And there are 2 different things within this credit channel also. We have to again look at them, which can be called as subcategories of credit channel. One is bank lending channel. Second one is balance sheet channel. See, bank lending channel, how it operates? It operates by altering the access of the firms and households to bank credit, since most businesses and people depend on banks for borrowing the money. For example, just to understand, let us say CRR is increased. Let us say RBI has increased CRR. That automatically makes what? The bank credit flow will become less. That means it is a contractionary monetary policy. On the other side, let us say if CRR is decreased, then that is an expansionary monetary policy, because now the banks need to maintain with RBI some amount which is lesser than earlier. That means more money is available with now banks. And what they will do with that? They will lend. So that means what? Credit flow will increase. So when CRR is decreased, credit flow will increase. When CRR is increased, credit flow will decrease. So that is the bank lending channel. How this RBI does that? Of course, there are different instruments through which the RBI influences, but the bank lending channel itself is one of the very important crucial channels which alters the access of the firms and households to the bank credit itself. It is not interest rate here. It is the total amount of money that is available to be financed by the banks itself can be changed. Like change in CRR, SLR types of rates will have an impact on amount of credit that is available itself. Naturally, that will have impact on the liquidity, and naturally that will have impact on how much money is actually borrowed by the people from the banks. That is called bank lending channel. Then balance sheet channel is not a direct thing, it is actually an indirect way of influencing the overall money flow or the aggregates. Let us see how this balance sheet channel works. See, logically, as a firm's cost of credit increases, the strength of its balance sheet deteriorates. Of course, this also happens, balance sheet channel also happening through rates of interest only. But it is having an indirect effect on the balance sheet whenever there is a change in the rate of interest. How that is going to happen? A direct effect of the monetary policy on the firm's balance sheet comes through an increase in the interest rates, leading to an increase in the payments that the firm must make to repay its floating rate debts. So that is one direct impact which we already have seen in the interest rate channel. When there is an increase, we are looking at one side, automatically we should understand reverse will happen on the opposite side. Let us say increase in interest rates happen. That will lead to increase in, simply speaking, interest payments by the companies. Naturally, what happened? The firm's balance sheet has become weakened because the available money for the shareholders has become lesser now. So naturally, that increases the amount that the firm must make to repay its floating rate debts. So that is one thing that happens immediately when there is an increase in interest rates. But on top of that, there is an indirect effect also that occurs when the same increase in the interest rate works to reduce the capitalized value of the firm's long-lived assets. So understand this way. Any value of anything, this from the financial management we should understand, whatever the return that it generates divided by the capitalization rate, isn't it? That is the value of anything. Value of any asset that a particular organization might have will be calculated like this only, not in accounting manner, but in an overall valuation manner. This is not going to be affected directly with the interest rates, but is this going to be affected by the interest rates? Yes. When the interest rates increase, the capitalization rate increases. When this increases, naturally the value decreases. That's what happening. Indirectly, when increase in interest rates is working to reduce the capitalized value of the firm's long-lived asset, that is another impact. That is what is popularly what we call as balance sheet channel. Even the balance sheet channel also working in both the ways, directly and indirectly. Directly it is reducing the strength of balance sheet because it is increasing the interest liabilities of the organization. Thereby, available surplus with the shareholders is being reduced. Indirect effect is that value of the long-lived assets is reduced because the capitalization rate is increased due to the increase in interest rates. And of course, the reverse will happen if the interest rates are decreased. That is a balance sheet channel, or we can say impact of the changes in interest rates on the balance sheets. Simple relation is very clear. When the firm's cost of credit rises, strength of the balance sheet deteriorates. That is pakka. How it happens? Either directly or indirectly, both ways it will happen. Now what is happening? A policy induced increase in the short-term interest rate now is not only acting immediately to depress the spending through the traditional interest rate channel, which we have anyway seen earlier. In addition to that, it is also acting possibly with a time lag to raise each firm's cost of capital through the balance sheet channel also. So the increase or decrease in the interest rates on one side has an impact on the interest rate channel anyway. In addition to that, it is having impact on the through balance sheet channel also, because that increase or decrease of interest rates is automatically having an impact on the value or strength of the balance sheet. Why you may say that strength of the balance sheet, why is it important? See, when the strength of the balance sheet deteriorated, automatically the ability of the firm to raise finance also will be deteriorated. When there is a strong balance sheet, a firm can raise the finance easily. If the balance sheet strength got deteriorated, ability to raise finance also gets deteriorated, and that will definitely have impact on its investment as well as the future growth prospects. So all these things are happening through balance sheet channel, wherein any policy induced change in the interest rate is impacting balance sheet also, in addition to anyway being impacting the interest rate channel. So this is called balance sheet channel, of course through changes in interest rates only, that also. Now another channel, the fourth one, the last one out of the monetary policy mechanisms is asset price channel. So asset price channel, what it is? So here basically the standard asset price channel suggests that asset prices respond to the monetary policy changes and consequently will affect output, employment, inflation. How? How? Let us see that. A policy induced increase, again we are looking at one side. Let us say there is an increase in the nominal interest rates. That makes debt instruments more attractive than the equities. Because when the interest rates are high, people who have money will try to buy bonds or debentures because they get more return there. So the demand for debt instruments will become more and they are more attractive than the equities in the eyes of investors, leading to what? A fall in the equity prices. This actually does not happen much in India. It's only a theoretical thing. That much of switching between debt and equity, that much sophistication is not there in a typical normal common Indian investor. But yes, at a broader level, big portfolio managers and mutual funds definitely will have their funds switched between debt and equity. When there is an increase in interest rate, definitely the demand for debt instruments will become more, and that makes equities less attractive, and that makes that fall in equity prices. And the stock prices, when they are falling after a monetary tightening is nothing but increase in the interest rates. That leads to reduction in the household financial wealth, leading to the fall in consumption, output, and employment. As I was telling, this is not something that directly happens in India, but the developed countries are capital market, sophisticated capital markets where there are, like United States of America, lot of people have their assets or wealth, financial wealth in the stock market. More than 35% of the people in America have stocks in their portfolio of assets. It is hardly around 3 to 4% in India. So that much difference is there. So the point is, equity is not big holding of assets in Indian context. But yes, on the other side, real estate is there, which has its own problems in India, like black money and all. Let us not get into that. But asset price channel, theoretically only, forget about particularly application, how it happens in India. But imagining a sophisticated market, definitely asset price channel also works. When there is an increase in the interest rates, automatically that makes debt instruments more attractive than equity instruments. And because of that, the financial wealth of the households will become lesser since the market prices of the equity shares have crashed. Because the financial wealth of the people has become lesser, they will consume less. Because they are consuming less, the output will be less, and naturally the employment also will become lesser. These are all things which will be interlinked with each other. But don't think these are all certain things which are happening like instant coffee or Maggi noodles. No, they are not going to happen. Today, interest rate increased and the impact we can see from tomorrow. No, definitely not. All these things will have their own time lag. That is one thing we have to always keep in mind. But over a period of time, will they have a similar impact? Yes, that is for sure. We have to understand the tendency. We have to only understand the direction. Timing depends. That depends upon so many factors. In between also a lot of other external things can change. So the real impact what was supposed to be created may not be created also. So a lot of shocks can be there in the economy. New things like coronavirus has come, demonetization earlier. These are called shocks, which are not known normally. So whatever the original plan may not work. That is always there. But that is not what we are focusing on. What is the way or monetary policy mechanism through which any change in the monetary policy will have an impact on the broad aggregates which are like employment, inflation, growth, etc. These are all called as monetary transmission mechanisms. Interest rate channel, exchange rate channel, then credit channel, which has two things in that. One is bank lending channel, second one is balance sheet channel. Also asset price channel. These are called monetary transmission mechanisms. Each of them can be asked separately as a question. All put together, one question can be asked. What are monetary transmission mechanisms? When only 2 marks question, 3 marks question is asked like that, don't have to explain each and everything. Just write in a nutshell what about each of them. 1 line, 2 lines is enough. Or even if you just write the side points also, that is enough in such a scenario. But individually, if these questions are asked, you have to explain what it is. That is the other side of it, related to the original thing that we started with. So where we have to understand the what was the monetary policy framework. Again, that is the guiding factor. Monetary policy framework had three aspects: objectives of monetary policy, which we studied just now, and then monetary transmission mechanism, four mechanisms, four routes we have studied. Then the last one is operating framework. What is this operating framework of a monetary policy? Operating framework relates to all aspects of implementation of monetary policy. So what are the aspects involved in the implementation of monetary policy? First thing first is choosing the target. Second is choosing the intermediate target. Then choosing the policy instruments. Of course, target and all is none of our business majorly, that RBI will take care of. Usually the operating target will be different, intermediate target will be different. But that is not core area of focus. Mainly what are the policy instruments available in Indian context to RBI and how it will use those policy instruments. The third one is going to be the most important aspect that we are going to discuss as part of the operating framework of monetary policy. But just for general understanding purpose, what is operating target? Generally, it is referring to the variable like inflation that a monetary policy can influence with its actions. Some target will be there. Okay, let us say the target of RBI is to control inflation or not to let the inflation grow. So what it will do? Either it will increase the interest rates or it will keep the interest rates intact. So inflation is the operating target. Then because of that, there is an intermediate target, something like, let us say, economic stability, let us say at a broader level. That is something which the central bank can hope, not necessarily always it will happen, to influence to a reasonable degree through the operating target. So through the control of inflation, economic stability is the intermediate target that the Reserve Bank of India or central bank is aiming to achieve, hoping to achieve. And definitely there should be some predictable and stable relationship between these goal variables. If there is no relationship at all between these two, how can the operating target will have an impact on the intermediate target? It will not have. So these two are related with each other. Definitely there should be a predictable and stable relationship between them, and through the operating target the central bank is hoping to achieve the intermediate target, something like example economic stability. These are operating target and intermediate target. So this can be a question only separately, what is the difference between operating target and intermediate target. Now the main thing here in this operating framework is monetary policy instruments. So many are there. And what are those? These monetary policy instruments are the various tools that a central bank can use to influence the money market and credit conditions and pursue its monetary policy objectives. Obviously, these are the tools which the RBI is going to use ultimately with an objective of influencing money market and credit conditions. Of course, to pursue the monetary policy objectives which it has already set. So to meet those operating targets and intermediate targets, that is a target. But how it can be achieved? There has to be some way. That instrument or tools are those which will be helping the RBI to achieve the targets what they have fixed for themselves. That is called the operating framework of monetary policy, consisting of operating target, intermediate target, and monetary policy instruments. And as I said, our major focus will be on the monetary policy instruments. These can be classified into direct instruments and indirect instruments also. In general, what are the direct instruments? The required cash reserve ratios, something like CRR, is a kind of direct monetary policy instrument. Or liquidity reserve ratios, in India we call that SLR, statutory liquidity ratio, that is prescribed from time to time. Any change in that definitely will have impact on the money supply. That is how it does. So these are the direct instruments that RBI has with itself. Who will decide CRR, SLR? Naturally, RBI decides. That is the instrument RBI has in its hands. That is one of them, one of the direct instruments we can say. Another direct instrument is directed credit, which takes the form of prescribed targets for the allocation of credit to the preferred sectors. In India, usually some targets are fixed. Actually, we see each union budget speech also, our finance minister usually tells, okay, this is the target farm loans that we have for the upcoming fiscal. That's what they say. For the last year prior to this, 10 lakhs crores was the targeted loans that should be given to agriculture sector. That government will tell, but government will not give loans. That RBI also will not give loans, but RBI directs the banks, commercial banks, to give certain loans to these priority sectors. In India, agriculture and MSMEs are popularly called as priority sectors. And once again, RBI itself will not give any loan directly to the people. No, it will create targets to the commercial banks and other organizations like NABARD, through which the credit flow to particular sector can be achieved by RBI. That is also direct instrument in the hands of RBI. RBI has that power to set such targets. That is called directed credit. So first direct instrument is CRR, SLR types of ratios, reserve ratios we can call them. Then second instrument is directed credit, targeted credit we can call it. Targeted credit or directed credit, which can be routed through certain preferred sectors, is one more direct instrument with RBI. Then administered interest rates, within which the deposit and lending rates are prescribed by the central bank. This does not happen in India, it's only in theoretical context. Banks are free to fix their own deposit and lending rates. RBI will not directly interfere into that. That is why you see certain banks, let us say most of the banks give 4% interest rate for the savings banks accounts, saving account. Kotak Bank gives 6%, S Bank gives 7%. Will RBI say that no, don't give like that? No intervention by RBI. But does it have power? Yes, it has. Only that it will not exercise. So if that power is exercised, it is called administered interest rates. That is another direct monetary policy instrument in the hands of RBI, through which it will prescribe the deposit rates and lending rates of the commercial banks. That is another possibility of taking it as a monetary policy instrument by the central bank. So these are the three direct monetary policy instruments we can say once again: reserve ratios, targeted credit, administered interest rates. These are direct monetary policy instruments. Of course, in that we will understand and discuss in detail what is CRR, what is SLR. The other two are self-explanatory. There is no separate thing required. That is basically coming from the RBI to the commercial banks in the form of, after all, a circular. Nothing else. No special things are there. So they will give one for a yearly target, quarterly target. RBI will send circulars to the commercial banks from time to time. Third one, as I said, is practically not applicable in Indian context much, at least now. Future we don't know. So those are direct monetary policy instruments. Now let us look at indirect monetary policy instruments. What are these indirect instruments? Very important. Repos, repurchase options, that is called repo and reverse repo. Then RBI also does open market operations. That is an indirect instrument with RBI. Standing facilities, like marginal standing facilities there in India. And also like market based discount window is created. So these are the four broad indirect monetary policy instruments. Once again, these names are international. Application of them to the Indian context, we will see that later. So when this question is asked, what are generally the indirect monetary policy instruments? Look at the earlier case also. Liquidity reserve ratio is not Indian name. In India we call it SLR. So these are international names. Cash reserve ratio is same everywhere. So directed credit is there. Administered interest rate. These are not particularly Indian context. These are conceptual, theoretical things. Any central bank will have these direct monetary policy instruments, indirect monetary policy instruments. How it happens in India, that is a different story, which we will look in the current session only after the completion of this theoretical framework. So the indirect monetary policy instruments with any central bank generally consist of these things: repo, open market operations, standing facilities, and market based discount window. What are these things? How they are actually used in India? One by one, let us see that. Some of them we already know, particularly in the advanced accounting, banking companies and all. These names are there, though application may not be there. But conceptually, for each of these names, we need to understand what actually that represents. One of those very important reserve ratios is cash reserve ratio, CRR. That refers to the fraction of the total net demand and time liabilities, that is called NDTL. We are going to use the same word, NDTL, now onwards. And by the way, now onwards we are looking Indian context. Indian context only we are looking at. So far it is all theoretical things, conceptual things applicable everywhere. Now what we are going to discuss now onwards is mostly related to the Indian context. So in India, RBI prescribes CRR. That means out of the total net demand and time liabilities, how much amount of a proportion of or fraction of that NDTL should be maintained as a cash deposit with Reserve Bank. So that is called CRR. So CRR is nothing but the requirement of a fraction of the total of NDTL of a scheduled commercial bank, which has to be maintained by that commercial bank with RBI as a cash deposit. That is what is CRR. So let us say if CRR is 3%, as it is now actually. So if CRR is 3%, that means what? Out of the 100 net demand and time liabilities of any bank, 3 rupees has to be kept in RBI as deposit with Reserve Bank of India. That is what is cash reserve ratio. Simply speaking, the cash deposit of commercial banks with the RBI is called CRR. That will be increased or decreased according to the requirement. So when the higher CRR is there, naturally what happens? Lower the credit creation capacity of the banks. Let us say from 3%, imagine if it increases it to 5. Now the banks have to keep out of the same 100 rupees, 5 rupees with the RBI. That means it can lend capacity at least to only 95. Earlier it was able to lend 97. Now it is able to lend only 95. That means what happened? Credit creation capacity of the banks got reduced. When CRR will be increased? Usually when inflation is high. When inflation is high, the Reserve Bank of India would like to reduce the money flow, then it will increase the CRR so that indirectly there is a impact on the credit creation capacity of the banks. When CRR will be reduced, usually when the deflation is there, means growth is low, recessionary conditions are there. Those times, if CRR is decreased, which happened latest in March 2020, after the coronavirus started impacting the Indian economy, lockdown is announced, RBI immediately reduced the CRR because without that, there is no possibility of liquidity being maintained in the country and economy. So, reduce CRR during deflation. In that case, the banks will expand the credit facilities and that increases naturally the supply of money available in the economy. So, that is the way or instrument or tool through which RBI is controlling money supply. Through prescribing how much percentage of the net demand and time liabilities of the commercial banks shall be maintained as a deposit with the Reserve Bank. That is CRR. So usually increase in the CRR to contain the credit expansion during inflation. So reducing CRR happens during deflation, increase in the CRR happens during inflation, which impacts the credit creation capacity of the banks, and effectively because of that, supply of money available in the economy also will be impacted. Impact of such things already we discussed in the second unit of this chapter. That is conceptually, if it is understood, same thing can be applied here also. But what is CRR specifically? If question is asked, we have to write these points particularly. That is what is CRR. Then what is SLR? That is statutory liquidity ratio. First of all, this is a prudential measure. And why is it and how is it different from CRR? We'll see that. SLR is a prudential measure, and all the scheduled commercial banks in India are required to maintain a stipulated percentage of their total demand and time liabilities or net demand and time liabilities in any of the following forms. So what are the forms in which the banks have to keep with them? They don't have to keep with RBI actually. They have to keep with them certain percentage of their total or net demand and time liabilities in these assets as cash or as gold or investments in unencumbered instruments. Unencumbered means not having much of risk, like what? Treasury bills, G-Secs, government securities or public sector enterprises bonds. In those investments, a certain percentage of the net demand and time liabilities has to be kept by the commercial banks with themselves. They are not keeping it with RBI, they are keeping with themselves. That is the difference between CRR and SLR. CRR has to be maintained by banks as cash with RBI, whereas SLR requires the holding of assets in one of the above three categories or any of the above categories by the bank itself. It doesn't have to give to anybody. If the bank itself is holding in any of these three types of assets as prescribed by the Reserve Bank of India, that is enough. So whatever the percentage of SLR is, which is I think approximately 18.5% now. That means what? If a bank has 100 net demand and time liabilities, it has to keep aside 18.5%, 18.5 rupees has to be kept aside. It cannot lend naturally because it has to keep in the form of cash, gold or investments. What is the biggest asset for the bank? Is it cash, gold, investments, or the bank branches, buildings, head offices they have? No, those are assets but not big. The biggest asset for the banks is the loans and advances what they have given to the people. Advances basically what they have given to the people. That is the biggest asset. So 18.5%, if they are keeping in cash, gold or investments, can they lend that much? No, they cannot lend. Means what? Only remaining money they can lend. Now once again the effect is same. SLR also, CRR also. Imagine if the RBI has made 18.5 to 20 in future. Of course it is not going to make, just example. Then what happened? The lending capacity of the bank has reduced. The lending capacity of the bank has reduced because it cannot lend 81.5% of its net demand and time liabilities like earlier. Now it can lend only 80% of its net demand and time liabilities. So if a bank takes 100 rupees from the public in the form of net demand and time liabilities, it can only lend say 80 rupees. That's all. So that is SLR. So statutory liquidity ratio is the amount which the commercial banks have to keep with themselves, not with RBI, either in the form of cash or in the form of gold or in the form of unencumbered instruments like treasury bills, government securities or public sector enterprises bonds. That is what is SLR, and it is different from CRR because CRR requires the banks to maintain cash deposit with RBI. SLR does not require anything like that. SLR requires only the banks themselves to maintain in any one of the above three categories of investments or assets. That is CRR and SLR. How the SLR works? Just now as we discussed, the changes in SLR chiefly influence the availability of resources in the banking system for lending. Naturally, a rise in SLR happened, let us say. When that should happen? Naturally, when the high liquidity is there, means inflation is high. Then, if the RBI raises the SLR requirement, then a fraction of the bank's assets are going to be definitely locked in the form of eligible instruments. That reduces the credit creation capacity of the banks. So, rise in SLR naturally reduces the credit creation capacity of the banks and vice versa. When there is a reduction in SLR during the periods of economic downturns, which are happening now, they have the opposite effect. Means reduction in SLR will increase the credit creation capacity of the banks. That increases money supply into the market. Of course, that does not automatically mean the banks will directly pump money into the market. As we discussed in the earlier chapter of money supply, that depends upon the bank's decision also. Sometimes banks may maintain excess reserves. If they maintain excess reserves, actually the change in SLR is not going to have much impact. Increase, decrease doesn't matter. Bank has a policy, they will keep 30% only as the cash, gold or instruments. They will not lend more than 70 rupees out of whatever 100 rupees of net demand and time liabilities they have. Let us say if that is a policy. Change in SLR from 18.5 to 19 or to 20 has no impact. Means this policy is definitely to be decided by the banks ultimately, but it will create the capacity of the banks. Definitely that will create an additional credit creation capacity of the banks if there is a rise in SLR, or if there is a fall in SLR, and if there is a rise in SLR, that will reduce the credit creation capacity of the banks. So for any of these things we can understand which is an expansionary policy, which is a contractionary policy. Expansionary policy increases the money flow, contractionary policy decreases the money flow. Let us say CRR increased, that is contractionary policy. SLR increased, contractionary policy. CRR, SLR decreased, that is expansionary policy because it increases the money flow. That conceptual understanding is very important about these ratios which are to be maintained by the commercial banks according to RBI guidelines. Who has control on the decision of them? Naturally, Reserve Bank of India. Now moving on to another very important aspect, even practically also and examination questions also, liquidity adjustment facility. What is that? This is a facility extended by the Reserve Bank of India to the scheduled commercial banks, of course not to the regional rural banks. Other than that, scheduled commercial banks and primary dealers have this facility called as liquidity adjustment facility. What is this facility? In case of requirement, they can avail of the liquidity. Of course, on the other side, if the commercial banks have excess funds, they can park the excess funds with RBI also in case of excess liquidity on an overnight basis against the collateral of government securities, including state government securities. So, simply speaking, it is a kind of overdraft facility, of the banks which is extended by RBI. Naturally, how this happens? Because RBI is a banker's bank. So suddenly, if a commercial bank wants some money, some liquidity it requires, it can just quickly, overnight, it can get a very short-term credit from RBI through this liquidity adjustment facility. Of course, it has to keep a collateral security as of government securities, which it already will have, because anyway it has SLR, no? Keeping that SLR securities is already there as requirement for the commercial banks. Giving them as collateral, what the banks are doing now, they are taking credit from RBI, they are taking money from RBI or loan from RBI in case there is a requirement. They can avail such liquidity from RBI on an overnight basis. On the other side, the banks have excess liquidity with them. They don't want money with them to be there. What they can do? They can park that money also with the RBI, as the case may be. So it is a kind of bank's account with RBI. Commercial bank's account, current account, let us say, with RBI, with the overdraft facility in the form of liquidity adjustment facility. Even if there is a requirement urgently by the banks, the Reserve Bank of India will support them. That is called a liquidity adjustment facility. Then another important aspect, very crucial policy rate, that is repo rate. What is repo? Basically, the operation of this repo is basically the repurchase options. In short, we call it as repo. What is this? It is an instrument for borrowing funds. Who is borrowing the funds? The commercial banks are borrowing the funds. How? They are selling the securities with an agreement to repurchase them, repurchase options. That is what we are calling repo. The repurchase option means the commercial banks are selling the securities to whom? Naturally RBI, with an agreement to repurchase them on a mutually agreed future date at an agreed price, which obviously includes the interest for the funds which are borrowed. So basically, when securities are sold and bought, then what is the big deal in that? There is no net impact. Net impact is what? For the period between the transactions of selling of securities and buying back of securities, there is interest that is charged. So who is selling securities and borrowing in effect is commercial bank. So simply speaking, repo rate refers to the rate at which the commercial banks borrow money from RBI. They will borrow money from RBI. How? By selling securities just on paper. Not necessarily they have the securities already. And they will buy the securities later on. So there is a money coming in and going out. Securities going out and coming in. Net effect is same. But in between, what happened? Definitely interest is payable by the commercial banks to the RBI. How much interest is payable at what rate? That is called repo rate. So that is the rate of borrowing the funds by commercial banks from RBI. That is a very important policy rate decided by the RBI as a part of its monetary policy. And by the way, once again, always we have to keep in mind, central bank is the banker's bank. Where from the commercial banks will go and borrow? Naturally from RBI. How? One of the ways of doing that is, these are all different instruments. LIF, liquidity adjustment facility, is one of them. Even they can borrow in this manner called as repurchase options, or in short repo. And the rate at which the commercial banks can borrow funds from RBI is called as repo rate. Right? This happens when it's an exercise of borrowing the funds from RBI. That we have to keep in mind. Next, what is reverse repo? Naturally, reverse means that is opposite of repo. This happens when it is also same kind of repurchase option, but reverse option. What the commercial banks are doing, they are lending funds to RBI by purchasing securities. So first they are purchasing securities, of course with an agreement to resell them at a mutually agreed future date, at an agreed price, naturally that includes the interest for the funds lent also. So repo is happening by selling securities and repurchasing them later, through which the banks are borrowing funds from RBI. Reverse repo is happening by purchasing securities from RBI now, means giving money to RBI now, and then later on selling them at a future date at a agreed, mutually already agreed price. So what is the difference between the selling price and purchase price? That reflects the interest for the funds which are lent. Lent by whom? Lent by banks. To whom? RBI. Or you may say, what is the problem for RBI? Why should it borrow funds from the commercial banks? Not in that sense. In one way we can say it is the investment that the banks are doing by keeping this money. In other words, basically parking this money with RBI. If they have excess liquidity with them, what that money will get to them? They have to give interest to their customers. And if they lend this money to some other borrowers, then they will earn some interest. Otherwise, just like that, if banks are having idle cash with them, what they will do with that? They don't get any return on that. It is idle. Na? So what they have to do ideally is, of course, they can buy some short-term instruments. That is also possible. Or they can park that money with RBI. At what rate? That is reverse repo rate. So basically, this is the operation that takes place when RBI borrows money from the banks by giving them securities. We have to look from both the sides. Better to look from commercial banks side. In case of repo, commercial banks are borrowing money from RBI. In case of reverse repo, commercial banks are lending money from RBI. In other words, RBI is borrowing money from commercial banks. So that is what reverse repo and repo always mean. And what is rate? Repo rate means the rate at which the commercial banks borrow money from RBI. Reverse repo rate means the rate at which RBI borrows money from the banks. Simple. That is the interest rate at which the commercial banks can park their excess liquidity with RBI. Simply speaking, that is the actual best understanding. Okay, technically RBI borrowing money from banks, banks lending money to RBI, both are same. Banks lending money to RBI, banks investing in RBI or giving or parking excess liquidity with RBI, both are same. So that is only for name difference. The essence is all the same, whether commercial banks are lending money to RBI or parking their money with RBI, or RBI is borrowing money from the commercial banks. In all cases, the rate of interest that is going to be given to the commercial banks by RBI is called as reverse repo rate. And now, these repo rate and reverse repo rate, how they will work, that also we should understand at a broader level. Let us say the repo rate is increased. When the repo rate is increased, naturally what happens? The banks will not borrow much money from RBI. Why? Because it becomes costly for them, right? So that is the rate at which the banks borrow funds from RBI. No? When the repo rate is increased, banks will take less borrowing from RBI. That means the money supply will be reduced. So that is why repo rate is a very important policy rate. Repo rate will have almost indirectly the impact on all the interest rates in the economy. So repo rate, if it is changing, means interest rates will increase automatically, because of which the banks will reduce their borrowing from RBI. That will reduce the money supply. That means it is a contractionary policy. Repo rate decreased, that is an expansionary monetary policy, because that will make the cost of credit cheaper to the commercial banks, and they will take more loans from the Reserve Bank of India, and then that in turn flows into the market and adds to the money supply. So increase in repo rate or decrease in repo rate can be respectively called as contractionary and expansionary monetary policy decisions. What about reverse repo? Let us say reverse repo rate has increased. That also is a contractionary. This is an important point. Lot of times people think repo rate increase, reverse repo rate increase will have opposite impacts. No, both of them will have same impact. Why is that? Reverse repo rate increased, let us say. What is happening? Interest rate which the banks can get if they invest money with RBI is increased, which means banks will keep money with RBI rather than lending to people. So money supply is still reduced, right? On the other side, reverse repo rate is decreased. That means banks will get less interest rate if they keep money with RBI. So what is their motivation to keep money with RBI? Other than the requirements, anyway they will keep. We are not talking about that. In addition to that, why should they keep money with RBI where the interest rate is low, which is reverse repo rate, rather than keeping money with RBI they will lend it to the public, means money supply will be increased. So impact of increase or decrease in repo rate or reverse repo rate is going to be same. Just because one is repo and the other one is reverse, don't think the impact is reverse. Impact is not reverse. Repo rate, reverse repo rate increase is a contractionary policy which will reduce the money supply and naturally aggregate economic activity. Decrease in the repo rate and reverse repo rate is an expansionary monetary policy which will increase the money supply into the market, and naturally because of that better economic activity will be improved also. That is the very crucial policy rates we can call repo and reverse repo. Then there is one more facility to the banks. In addition to the LAF already they have, there is a marginal standing facility called MSF popularly. It is the facility under which the scheduled commercial banks can borrow additional amount of overnight money from RBI over and above what is available to them through the liquidity adjustment facility. Already they have a liquidity adjustment facility. Imagine if that is also exhausted. Still the commercial bank urgently needs money. Can it borrow from RBI? Yes, definitely yes. That facility to the commercial banks is called as marginal standing facility. This facility is given to the scheduled commercial banks over and above LAF, that we have to keep in mind. Of course, this is good for the commercial banks because it gives like a safety wall against unexpected liquidity shocks to the banking system. Suddenly money requirement has come, but it is not there with the banks. What they can do? To whom they have to look at? Because RBI is the banker's bank, they have to take that from RBI only. That is a facility. Whether banks always use them or not is their choice. But that facility is there to the commercial banks. That is called marginal standing facility. That can act like a safety valve against unexpected liquidity shocks to the banking system. And in general, naturally the marginal standing facility will be the last resort for the banks. They will not go for it just like that regularly. That is the last resort for the banks. When they will go for it? Only when they exhaust all the other borrowing options, including LAF, because interest rates on LAF will be lower naturally when compared with MSF. See, MSF is not given just like that by RBI at the same rates of LAF. LAF interest rates will be lower. LAF interest rates will be lower. MSF interest rates will be naturally higher. So it's as good as a penal interest rates. Higher interest rates will be there for marginal standing facility if the banks take it from RBI. Of course, it is only a facility once again. If the banks have exhausted all other options, but there is no other option for them but to take it, then they go for adopting and taking the marginal standing facility at a naturally higher rate of interest, which RBI charges onto the banks. So practically, the MSF represents the upper band of the interest corridor. That is the highest interest rate we can say in all these rates. What is MSF rate we can call it. Then in the middle there is repo rate. Then below that reverse repo is the lower band. So this is one thing conceptually we can understand. MSF rate is the highest rate. Then repo rate is the lower than MSF rate definitely. Reverse repo rate is that lower than that also. Again, understand logically, no need to by heart it. Repo rate is the rate at which banks borrow from RBI. So RBI charges higher rate than RBI gives. Naturally, any bank, RBI is also a bank. So it also makes money with the difference between repo rate and reverse repo rate. Banks are RBI's customers, imagine. When RBI is lending to the banks, then the interest rate will be higher. When RBI is taking money from the banks, interest rate will be lower. So that is why reverse repo is the lowest of the band of the entire list we can say. So MSF rate higher, less than that repo rate, further less than that is reverse repo rate, and that is a very important aspect to understand about all the three, but particularly about marginal standing facility. That is a facility which is over and above the liquidity adjustment facility through which the commercial banks can borrow additional amount of overnight money from RBI yet higher rates of interest. That is MSF. Then one more short question, though it is not much practically observable directly. Market stabilization scheme, but question anytime can be asked. So what is this market stabilization scheme? The government will always look at these things only as if they are doing some favor, but still it's not a scheme or something, but yes, it is some kind of possibility for the government. What happens in this market stabilization scheme is Government of India central government borrows from the RBI as if it is doing some favor from RBI. It borrows from RBI, and such borrowing being additional to its normal borrowing requirements. Normally, the government of India also will have deposits with RBI, and we have to also keep in mind the central bank is a banker to government also. It is a government's bank. So government's money will be with it, deposits also, and government will borrow from the Reserve Bank also. We have seen that. Ways and means advances, overdraft facility, that will be anyway there. Over and above that, the borrowing here we are looking at under the MSS is additional to that. And how it borrows? By issuing treasury bills or dated securities that are utilized in absorbing from the market excess liquidity of a more enduring nature arising from large capital inflows. If there is a huge capital inflow that is coming, let us say FDI has come, some big investment has come, lot of capital inflow happened into the country, which happens also normally. Then what happened? The liquidity in the country has increased too much. When the liquidity in the country has increased too much, a little bit of that has to be sucked out. RBI will do that anyway, but now what government is trying to do, it is also doing its part by selling or issuing its treasury bills, and through which it is raising money from RBI or borrowing money from RBI. So what happened? The money supply in the market for the public is reduced. So it is a way of government borrowing from RBI over and above its normal borrowing requirements. That is called market stabilization scheme. And how it works? Where the government issues the treasury bills, and because of that what happens? The excess liquidity in the market is sucked out or absorbed, we can say. That is what is MSS, market stabilization scheme, and rationale behind it is also to be understood because central bank is banker to government also. That has to be kept in mind. Then a question can be asked, oh, sir, what is bank rate? Bank rate is what generally? So usually the bank rate is now MSF rate only. That is the highest one what we are looking at. Marginal standing facility rate is there now. That itself is called as bank rate nowadays. Earlier these two are different, now both are same. So as and when MSF rate changes, alongside the policy repo rate also changes and the bank rate also changes automatically. So these rates are all linked with each other now. So there is no separate rate called bank rate now. It is basically equivalent to or aligned to marginal standing facility rate, which is the upper band, we can say. Below that is repo rate, below that is reverse repo rate, as we already observed. Now this bank rate is not used for other purposes, only it is used for calculating penalty on the commercial banks if they default in the maintenance of CRR or SLR. Only for that purpose this is used. Otherwise there is no separate rate called bank rate. The bank rate is nothing but MSF rate only now. Both are one and the same. They have been made equal. So that is what is bank rate. Then what are open market operations that the RBI does? And these are all indirect policy instruments of RBI. We have seen that earlier in the list. Repo, open market operations, all these facilities, standing facilities given. These are all part of the indirect instruments of RBI as part of its monetary policy implementation. Instruments, we can say. This is one of the instruments that tools RBI uses by doing open market operations. Name itself indicates. Means what? RBI is conducting some market operations. Market operations is nothing but sale or purchase of government securities to and from the market. Just imagine one logic. If RBI sells the government securities, what happens? Money is coming from the system to RBI. If RBI buys the government securities, money is going to the system from RBI. Simple. So, depending upon the requirement, the RBI will do these open market operations. So, it wants to either pump money into the economy or suck the money out of the economy. That is the indirect way of regulating the money supply, with an objective to adjust the rupee liquidity conditions and of course in the market on a durable basis. Liquidity conditions in the market on a durable basis. If the RBI wants to create a stability of the rupee liquidity, then it will do the open market operations if it is required to do. Daily it will not do. If it feels that it is required to be done, it will do. So if the RBI feels there is excess liquidity in the market, what it will do? Simply it will resort to sale of the securities. So naturally because of that what happens? It is sucking out the rupee liquidity. It is reducing the rupee liquidity. So money is going from people or market to RBI. To that extent, liquidity is reduced. On the other side, when the liquidity conditions are tight, you can understand in the recent past when there is a liquidity conditions tight in the recessionary phase or a deflationary type of situations, then RBI will buy the securities from the market. So what is happening? Money is coming from RBI to the market. So more liquidity is pumped into the market. So in the case of liquidity crunch in the market, RBI will buy securities from the market, with which more money or liquidity is pumped into the market, that releases liquidity into the market. So this is sucking and pumping are common words, they are not bad words as far as RBI's open market operations are concerned. Definitely the monetary policy's ultimate responsibility or ultimate goal will be either to increase the money flow or to decrease the money flow. That itself ultimately is happening when RBI or government is pumping money or sucking money out of the market. That means liquidity being increased or decreased. It is simply like a tap, that is with RBI. But RBI has not only just one tap, it can change the overall money supply and rupee liquidity in different ways. It can change CRR, SLR, it can change repo rate, reverse repo rate, MSF rate, and it can do open market operations also. These are all the various instruments through which RBI implements its monetary policy, through which it will try to change the liquidity available in the market, and naturally through which it wishes to achieve certain broader targets like control of inflation, economic stability, growth, employment, all these things. Objective is that. And who does all this? Naturally, Reserve Bank of India, that is our central bank. Now, how this works? What is the organizational framework of this monetary policy implementation? That happens through the Monetary Policy Committee. This can be a question also. This Monetary Policy Committee is something which consists of 6 members of diverse backgrounds, and that shall determine the policy rates to achieve the inflation target through debate and majority vote. Of course, being a democratic country, at least theoretically, the organization which decides upon the policy rates should finally conclude their final decisions through debate and majority vote by the panel of experts. And this new system is intended to incorporate diversity of views, because these 6 members will be coming from different backgrounds, mostly from banking sector, but other people also from industry will be also there, and specialized experienced people will be there as part of this monetary policy committee. Independent opinion they have relative to or compared with government directly, and representativeness from different segments will be there. Accountability will be also induced. These are all big objectives this new system is intended to incorporate. It's a different discussion. Once again, practically this independent nature of monetary policy committee itself is in jeopardy in the recent past, and some of the members of the monetary policy committee are not really having a positive impact on the decisions. A lot of things are there. Once again, those are mostly political and practical in nature. We don't need to worry about that. Theoretically, with a bookish target or bookish objectives of monetary policy committee is to achieve all these good things by having multiple members from different cross sections of the society and industry. That is monetary policy committee, and organization, or we can say the structure through which the monetary policy decisions are taken, and then they will be implemented, announced to the market, and then there will be implementation of them into the economy. And you can see this every quarter. Actually, there will be quarterly review meetings, and in these quarterly review meetings the monetary policy committee will review various rates, whether they want to change them or keep them at the same level. It is their decision, and these things are common as far as the general structure is concerned. Even Federal Reserve also will have a review of various things at a periodic basis. So they keep on meeting on a periodic basis, discuss, debate, and then finally decide something by a majority vote. That's called Monetary Policy Committee. But of course, for a country like India, there are so many challenges also in deciding the monetary policy. It is not something very easy, because it is a very complex process because of the surrounding uncertainties, one part, and also the very big challenge in India is to achieve this trade-off between growth and inflation. And as we discussed earlier, you want growth, automatically inflation also will be high, and both will be actually nullifying their positive impact, because one is positive, one is negative. Automatically the fruits of that growth will not be coming to the public. So that is why usually in the earlier cases, nowadays at least, in the current scenario, we don't have that much of thought about growth also. At least if we can maintain it at the current level, that itself is success now. At least in the years where the growth rates at least are very good in India, at one point in time, nominal double-digit growth rates also happened in India. At that time, the nominal double-digit growth rates are there, but high inflation was also very high. So there was no real impact of that growth rate. So that has to definitely force the Reserve Bank of India governors, past governors, and so many of them earlier have increased the interest rates. They never decreased the interest rates because they want to control inflation. And on the other side, because of that higher interest rates in India, our investment opportunities and foreign direct investment possibilities have reduced. So it is very difficult to manage these things because always these things will go on opposite direction with each other. So we want growth, inflation also will come. Growth is good, inflation is bad. When both are going in same direction, the positive effects of growth will be nullified by the negative effects of rising in inflation. How to manage that? Very difficult challenge that any monetary policy or monetary policy committee or RBI governors themselves will face. That is quite common. And there are certain books by the ex RBI governors also, though they may not be of much interest at this level for you, but maybe later on you may read them. I Do What I Do and Who Moved My Interest Rates. These are the titles of the books. Raghuram Rajan and earlier Duvur Subbarao sir have written as RBI governors how they reacted to the market conditions and interest rates. Particularly the interest rates movement is in the hands of RBI, but it is not that easy. Definitely a lot of political pressure will be there and social pressure, market pressure, so many pressures will be there. Within that complex environment, complex situation, RBI has to come out with a monetary policy which actually gives the result. Just coming out with a monetary policy and telling so many big things in the news conferences will not give results. If it gives results, then we say monetary policy is successful. If it does not give results, then that is a failure. As simple as that. There is no big debate required when it comes to results. They will show. Everything will show in the economy. The beauty of market economy particularly is we cannot hide it. We may hide it for some time, but that will not be forever. That will automatically show in the growth rates, in the employment, in the inflation, and or recessionary situation. All of them will come out as a result of bad fiscal policy or bad monetary policy if the things are negative. If the things are positive, definitely those are also contributed by a better good fiscal policy from the government and a good monetary policy by RBI. Both will have to work together in tandem to achieve those big macroeconomic objectives. But yes, it is not that easy. It is a very complex circus kind of. And not only that, India has certain peculiar situations also, like emerging markets like India have very other things like inflation is influenced by international petroleum prices. This is one thing also recently not much big problem because international petroleum prices have been not increasing much since past 6 to 7 years. But earlier, the international petroleum prices when they increase, because we have almost 90% dependency on the import of crude oil, our inflation rates also will increase. So one way growth is happening, development is happening, everything is going good. Suddenly this all rise in petroleum prices will nullify that. And RBI will be confused. Should they control inflation or should they go for growth? What should they do? So many external influences and factors also are there which will also make the monetary policy very challenging. One of the examples. And in India, food prices also have a good big contribution to inflation. And a practical understanding, we can have onion prices, how much it will change in a year. At some point in time, onion will be available for 5 rupees per kg. At some point in time, the onions will be available at 100 rupees, 120 rupees per kg. Too much of fluctuations in food prices. This happens. This is one of the factors that emerging markets like India are facing. Particularly the petroleum prices and food prices will have an impact on inflation, other than the only pure financial factors like interest rates. So what RBI has to do, some balancing act, some trade-off it has to do, and that job is definitely quite challenging. These are the various challenges in monetary policy decisions to be taken by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, Just for general knowledge purposes, don't need to remember any of these things. This is not a GK exam, this is a concept oriented examination. So, for general knowledge purposes, recent rates, RBI monetary policy rates, we can just look at that. The data came from RBI itself. That is the key indicators of RBI monetary policy. Currently, CRR is 3%, SLR is 18.5%, repo rate is 4%, reverse repo rate is 3.35%, and MSF and bank rate both are same as I said, 4.65%. So, what is the top band? 4.65%. What is the medium band? 4. What is the lower one? 3.35%. So, what is the difference between these two? 0.65%. What is the difference between these two also is 0.65%. That is the broad policy rates. Interest rates wise, these are the things. MSF rate itself is bank rate. These two are not interest rates. CRR and SLR related to reserve ratios which are supposed to be maintained by the banks. That means the commercial banks now have to maintain 3% of their net demand and time liabilities with RBI as cash deposits. And at least 18.5% of their net demand and time liabilities they have to keep in the form of gold or cash or other government investment instruments. That is what are key things that will be generally coming out every quarter. If there is any change, there will be a news item. If there is no change, they will continue to be the same. But monetary policy decisions have to be taken by the Monetary Policy Committee at RBI, and these are the key indicators we can say at any point of time. And we understood each and every one of them, and more than that also, what are the implications of the monetary policy on the economy, money supply, and on the broader macroeconomic aggregates we discussed. Ultimately, whenever we look at any of these things, one point you have to keep in mind whether it is an expansionary monetary policy or a contractionary monetary policy. Logically, if you think, it will automatically come. Anything which increases the money supply is expansionary, anything which decreases the money supply is contractionary. So, as a result of one decision, whether the money supply will increase or not, whether the liquidity in the form of cash in the market increases or not, whether the bank credit in the market increases or not, that only we have to see and observe, so that we can decide whether a particular monetary policy is an expansionary policy or contractionary policy, and under which circumstances these policies will be taken. Also, we should know that. With that, we can conclude this chapter 3 related to the money market, consisting of 3 units related to money demand, money supply, and monetary policy. And in the next session, we will continue with the last chapter of Economics for Finance, that is chapter 4, related to international trade and various aspects of global significance. Till then, take care, bye bye, thank you very much.